Let's talk to Andrew Allison from the Freedom Association, who I think it's probably right to say is spitting feathers about all of this. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Andrew. I mean, so much of our rights have been sort of made to disappear over time, over the past year or so. We were all hopeful that with this roadmap that they would be coming back to us slowly but surely. But here we are, almost in April, and none of them have come back.
Yeah, I mean, last December, Matt Hancock was saying with the vaccine rollout it's going to be brilliant, and in all fairness, it has been brilliant.
Yeah,
no one can complain about that. This was going to be the silver bullet. This was the light at the end of the tunnel. I think, as I said to you about a month ago when you last interviewed me, it appears that the tunnel is just getting longer. Over half of the adult population in the UK has now received the first dose of a vaccine, probably the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. I got mine last Friday.
Yeah.
That means by the beginning of June, more than half of the population are going to be fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
Against
with
COVID.
2 vaccines? Yeah.
Yeah, with 2 vaccines. And we read that report from the beginning of the week from the United States, 79% efficacy at protecting people against symptoms, but 100% efficacy for protecting people against serious illness, hospitalizations, death. I mean, this is great news, isn't it? So why the hell are the government still wanting to keep these coronavirus restrictions in place?
Well, this is it. And I mean, I heard somebody this morning saying and justifying it, I think, from the government's perspective by saying, oh, well, of course, what they want to be able to do is act quickly if something changes. Well, if something changes, they could always make emergency legislation. That's why it's called emergency legislation. You know, they can change it at a moment's notice, regardless of whether there's a pandemic going on, regardless of whether we've seen they can work from Zoom calls. They don't have to all be in the house in order to do it. You know, and it just seems to me that it would signal a great deal of optimism to people if they actually said, you know what, we've decided not to extend them. We don't think they're going to be necessary.
Well, most of the powers that they've got now, and I'm just sort of reading this as well, I'm looking to one side, is from the Public Health Control of Disease Act of 1984, and that was amended in 2008 in the Health and Social Care Act. They've got a lot of these powers anyway, and I bet people don't realise just how much powers that the government really does have anyway at its disposal. I mean, the Coronavirus Act has covered various things such as school closures, even postponing the elections to the General Synod of the Church of England, which I found rather amusing. So you know, the government has gold-plated powers that it already had. But, you know, surely now is the time to get rid of these powers. We need to get our freedoms back. We need to have a summer that's worth living, rather than one where we think, well, the government could just close things down again, or it could close schools down again.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's extended for another 6 months, Mike, there's a potential there. At the beginning of September, the government says, oh, coughs and sneezes and different respiratory illnesses are on the rise again. So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to close the schools down.
Well, exactly right, because the idea of bringing masks in to be worn at all times in schools was meant to be up to Easter, and then it would be reviewed. But I would guarantee you, Andrew, right now, that the schools will say, oh, yes, it's working terribly well. Let's just keep going with it.
Well, I'm not quite sure whether the schools would say that, Mike, but I bet the government says that.
No, the schools love it. No, I mean, you talk to anybody who's in the school system, any teacher, most of them are quite happy to keep it going because they believe the rhetoric that's come out of Westminster, and they believe the sage scientists that they are keeping themselves safer by wearing masks. And I think it's absolutely outrageous.
Well, I think it's outrageous, and I'm surprised so many teachers think like that. I mean, obviously, teachers in primary schools don't think like that because the children don't wear them. Although I did come across a case a few weeks ago, I think it was a Roman Catholic primary school, which was going to insist that children as young as 7 would wear masks all day. I mean, that's child cruelty, isn't it?
Well, I believe so. But I mean, so many parents are also allowing it to happen and allowing it to be imposed upon their children without even putting up any kind of fight and just kind of nodding their heads and going, all right, you know, down where I am, the parents go and wait outside the school gates with masks on in the open air for their kids to come out with masks on in the open air. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, we've got to do that. Mike, seriously, that is the recommendation from my child's school. My son is 4 years old, and I dropped him off at school at 8:30 this morning, and I was wearing a mask because they want us all to wear a mask in the open air. I think it's totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
But just everybody complies. If you don't wear one, people start looking at you, and you just think, you go for the quiet life, don't you?
I don't. Sorry. No, it's not my way. But let's talk about the pubs.
It's not my way normally, Mike. I can tell you. It's not normally my way.
Maybe more people should.
Maybe about school.
Well, you know, the thing is, more people should be standing up against it. I really think so. What about the pubs business today? Front pages, vaccine passport to go to the pub. You know, pubs could ask for jab passports. I can't imagine there'll be many people that would want to do this. However, there are people I'm seeing on social media saying, yes, I would like to go to a COVID-safe environment, and I would be more than happy to give my money to an operation that was asking people for proof that they've been vaccinated before they enter.
Well, I don't want to rehearse some of the arguments that have already been made on this radio station this morning, because I think it is completely unworkable. I completely agree with guests that Julie has had on and what Nigel Farage has just said. But also, pubs have been closed for months and months. My neck of the woods, they've been open since the 4th of November.
Right.
They've hemorrhaged a lot of cash. You're already expecting pubs to increase the numbers of staff who are going to do all the table service stuff. Well, I mean, they just can't afford even to employ more members of staff to try and administer a scheme that is completely unworkable.
Well, they'd have to employ all the staff, but they'd have to all be over 65, wouldn't they? If they had wanted them to be vaccinated twice.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true, because the majority of the staff are going to be under the age of 50 years old, and then are going to have received a COVID jab. And Nigel's absolutely right in what he said. What about his son? He mentioned his son who was 30, but what about me if I bring my 21-year-old stepson to a pub?
Yeah.
I mean, is he going to be refused entry because he hasn't had the jab?
Well, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Well, it is nonsense, because he can legitimately say, well, I've never been offered the jab.
Right.
The government say I can't have the jab. I'm well down in the queue. So it is a total nonsense.
And again, it's not about wanting to go for a pint. There are people on social media who are always banging on about, well, all Mike Graham cares about is going to the pub. No, what I care about is a very important part of the business economy of this country, which generates billions and billions of pounds for the exchequer and for individuals, and also employs millions of people. And that is why we want it back, not because I'm thirsty and I need a drink. I can get a drink, thanks very much indeed. I've got plenty of wine at home. There's plenty of beer in the supermarkets. It's not about that. It's about putting the money back into the country's business.
Of course it is. That's exactly right. I mean, it's all right for those people who are sitting at home, maybe furloughed for a year. They've got 80%, maybe even 100% of their wages. Those people, mainly in the public sector, are just having a great time of it, working from home. It's absolutely fine for them. But they've got to realize that those people who are not working in the hospitality industry, many of them are going to lose their jobs. Many of them may lose their homes. This is going to be a disaster for them, and you really have to think about those people in the hospitality sector and get the thing opened up again.
Absolutely right. I mean, I was quite surprised yesterday to see the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey of all people, finally making an actual decision and finally coming down on some kind of commonsensical ground. A year ago he was elected leader of the Lib Dems, and he said he didn't know what his policies would be because he had to ask everybody else in the country. He's now decided that he thinks the lockdown should be eased. We asked him to come on the show today to talk about it. He said he was too busy.
Well, I'm sure he was. I mean, we all know that the Liberal Democrats, they're neither liberal nor democratic, really.
No, not really.
Fortunately,
there's not very many of them.
Well, that is true. That's true as well. But I mean, come on. I mean, if Sir Ed Davey has now found something liberal in his bones and his water or whatever, then great. But I don't think he'll ever come on this particular radio station because you'll give him too much of a hard time.
Well, I came into the tent of common sense once. I don't think he left with anything other than a flea in his ear. But Andrew, listen, thank you very much indeed. Andrew Allison there from the Freedom Association, very concerned about tonight's vote, because tonight's vote, of course, could well mean that the government extend their rights to completely and utterly lock down the economy, make sure that we don't go anywhere, that we can't go anywhere, and that they can keep fining us for doing anything that they don't want us to do, all the way through until the end of September and possibly into October. That's got to be crazy, hasn't it? 0344